Get in, losers. We're going book shopping. Come with me to the thrift store as we peruse the shelves looking for books to add to my book collection. Come on, let's go. it's about a week later. So thanks for coming with me on that little book adventure. As you can see, I found a couple of interesting books. I did pick up Roxane Gay's Hunger. It's been on my TBR. I've been meaning to read it for years and years. And so when I saw it in the store, I said, you know what? Let me pick it up. I opted not to get that Toni Morrison book. I was thinking about it, but off camera, when I opened it, the print was tiny, tiny, tiny. And someone, I guess it had been a book for somebody's school because they had underlined things and highlighted things. And when I am looking at adding a book to my collection, like on the bookshelf, it's got to be in pristine shape, like almost brand new shape. And frankly, I think I'd rather have the hardback. I have a signed hardback already. And if I'm going to collect Toni Morrison books, I would rather have hardbacks than softbacks. So if I want to read it, I can always go to the library. Most libraries have a pretty extensive collection of her writings. So, yeah, I opted not to get that one. It actually was kind of a quiet, dull day at the thrift store for finding books. Usually I find a few interesting things, but it was Saturday morning and, maybe they had just not gotten a lot of books that week. Who knows? Maybe somebody came in and, bought a bunch. But I seem to have had better luck a few weeks ago when I went at that time. But what day did I go for that? Did I go during a weekday? I might have. I can't remember now. But anyway, so I got the Roxane Gay book. Also, just FYI, what am I reading now? I'm reading Death of the Author. And I have to say, this is fantastic. If you are looking for a science fiction, but not super technical science fiction, this one is good. It's definitely my favorite so far of Nnedi Okorafor. I have Who Fears Death over there on my other bookshelves. But yeah, I think this one is way better, which should be. This is her latest, and Who Fears Death came out like 15 years ago or something. So definitely pick that up from your library or bookstore. It's definitely, so far, one of the best reads I've read this year. So that's it for the reading portion. Let's talk a little bit about how my revision's going, because I haven't talked about that so far this month. So in October, I said that I had added about 4,000 words about halfway through October. And that's all I added. I did not add any other words at all, or at least not enough to move the needle. I think I ended up with just over 4,000. I think it was like 4,020, something like that. I just didn't have the energy after being sick for basically a week to keep going. So, y'all, 4,000 for October. The goal was to do 10,000. If you haven't heard, I am trying to add 10,000 words for the last quarter of 2025 so I can get my manuscript up to 60,000 words. I feel like if I have something over 60K, it has a fighting chance of actually being published. So I was supposed to get 10. I only got 4. That means we have a lot of ground to make up for the next 2 months. Do I think I can do it? Yes. If I get my act together and I really lock in. I am going, I'm doing pretty well so far in November. It's November 16th today, and this past week, Tuesday was a holiday here in the United States. So I spent that day writing. That was a writing day. I ran a couple of errands, but I was back by 10 a.m. and locked in for the rest of the day because I might as well treat it like a work day. Just I'm going to work on something else besides my day job. And I got a lot done. And I'm feeling really good about the revision, but I am not even halfway through the book. So I think for me, it's the first third of the book is really where the most work needs to be. In fact, I'm still tinkering with chapter 1, even though I have moved on. I think I'm in the middle of chapter 5 right now, but I just thought about it last night and I said, you know what? I think I need to do more for chapter 1. It needs a little bit more. And I'm probably still going to be tinkering with it. The back half of the book, I would say like the final third, I'm actually pretty happy with. But, it needs some, zhuzhing. So, a little bit more description, a little bit better sentences. It just needs more tinkering. The first third of the book needed an overhaul. Like, I cut out half the words and then added back, another, 700 words. So that chapter really, really needed some work. And chapter 2 needed some work too. I needed to really dig into it. The book is a dual POV, meaning it's two people's point of view. So there's one chapter introducing one character, and the second chapter introduces the second character. And I feel like if I nail those two chapters, the book will be, cooking with gas. I feel like it will be much more confident. The problem is that when I wrote that first draft, I didn't really know who these characters were at first. And by the end of the book, I knew them much, much better. So now I'm going back and I'm adding in all the stuff that I know about them. I'm trying to really, really nail these introductions. And frankly, I think that that's probably where the most of the work needs to go. However, it also means that I haven't touched, say, chapter 10, 11, and 12. There's 20 chapters altogether. And I really need to look at those. So I kind of can't spend all my time just going back to chapters 1 and 2. 3's okay. I kind of knew 3 was going to be good. But I just have to keep coming back to them. But at some point I have to let them go and get on with it and work on the other chapters. So we have about 6 weeks left of the year. And I still have another 15 chapters to update, 16 if you count chapter 5 that I'm working on right now. And so I need to really, really dig into the rest of these chapters and update them so that they are smooth, that they make sense, that I'm not repeating information. There are a couple of tweaks to names that I know I need to do. Not so much I changed them, but I changed who is talking in that scene. It was one character, now it's a different character. So it's not that the name needs to be changed, it's just sort of the scene needs to be reoriented. And that's not difficult, but it is tedious, because you're like, oh, I got to go in and find all these instances and change them and this and that and the other. But, that's the work of rewriting, is you learn the story better and better and better. And I'm sure this is just one of many revisions. I'm definitely going to have to go back and revise more in the coming year. But if I can get a really good draft 2, then I will feel confident to show it to other people. And that's really what needs to happen. I went back to some of my older journals and I was trying to figure out when I actually got the first idea for this story. And it was July 2023. That was when I wrote in my journal, I have a new idea. That I didn't realize it was that long ago, but it's almost 2.5 years ago that I had initially this story, and I'm still haven't shown it to anybody. Well, that's not true. When I first decided to lean into this project, which was December 2023, I wrote a brief first chapter and a synopsis, and I showed it to my critique group, and they were like, oh, this looks interesting. Oh yeah, we're onto it. And that kind of gave me the confidence to move forward with this project. So um, I'm feeling very, I'm feeling very confident about the story that I've written. But I also am like, I think it's good. Who else might think it's good? So I want to hurry up and get the second draft done so that I can share it with people and, really start to see where it's weak, where it needs to be strengthened, and, does it have legs? Does this novel actually have what it takes to be out in the world? Yeah. So that's my goal for 2026 is to start getting it out into the world and see where it's going. I have a couple of other ideas for stuff I want for 2026, but we're not going to talk about that till end of the year, and we aren't even past American Thanksgiving yet. So that's just going to have to wait. But as for the revision, I learned a technique years ago, and it's something that I still do to this day, and it's really helpful. So when I took a class in my grad program, it was called Advanced Revision, and we had to do this exercise where you would take either a chapter from your novel that was you were working on or a short story, and every paragraph you had to list what the purpose of that paragraph was. What is the purpose of this paragraph? What is the purpose of the next paragraph? Even if that next paragraph was just like a line of dialogue, what did it serve a purpose? And what it did was it cut out a lot of excess fluff and purple language and things that didn't really matter, and instead really nailed down the scene so that you felt like the story all made sense and that there was pacing and that the characters were moving towards something. So I've been doing that with all of my chapters, is that I look at each chapter and I kind of read it through and I kind of ask myself, what is the purpose of the character going here? What is the purpose of the character doing this? Everything has to earn its place. In other words, everything has to make sense, and it has to make sense in the world that you are creating. And it's a little tedious, but what I found is when I do that, my stories have really good pacing, and they also tend to pull the reader along because the reader starts to understand that every paragraph is meaningful. There is no wasted space. It also cuts down on you going off on tangents about stuff that doesn't really matter in the story. Who cares if the bedspread is pink? That doesn't matter. What matters is that there's a gun on the bed, something like that. So I really enjoyed that exercise, and I still do it to this day. And I think that ultimately helps with the revision process, but it does become a little tedious after a while, which is probably why I'm still working on the first third of the book, because I'm just not able to completely move past that section. I keep asking myself, do I need more? Does this make sense? And that's good. That's good for the book. I think ultimately that will help me. But it is frustrating when you've set this deadline for the end of the year and you're still working and tinkering on chapter 1. Yeah. So hopefully, by the time December 31st comes along, I will be past that. Pray for me, if you pray, because I don't want to get stuck in this loop. But at the same time, I want it to be good, and maybe, who knows, maybe by the time I get to like chapters 10, 11, and 12, I'll say, oh, you know what, these are actually okay, because I felt like by the time I got to that point, that's about the midpoint of the book, I was like, okay, I know what happens. I know what's going on. I know these characters really, really well. And I felt like my story was really much easier to write. The beginning is always tough. for some reason. For me, at least. I don't know. Maybe some other people's it's easy. But the halfway point to the end is always easier for me to write. Maybe it's because I've just kind of already thought the book all the way through, so I kind of know how it ends. I always know, I've said this before, I always know how every story ends that I start writing, but I don't know. I guess it's just how I work and how my brain works. It's fun. It's fun making the first chapter so much better than it used to be. I feel really confident that the changes I'm making are really for the best. But it's frustrating that I haven't moved forward. So I guess that's my goal for the end of this month, the end of November. I want to get through to at least the midpoint. If I can get to chapter 10, revise chapter 10 and I start chapter 11 December 1st, I actually will be happy with that. As for the word count, I have no idea. I have written kind of where I started, like the total number of words I have, and I have the total number of words for the end of October, but I don't have how many words I've added since then. I try not to focus on word count, to be honest with you, when I actually do write. And so that's a habit I just haven't gotten into. I just don't obsess over word count. I really don't. It's as long as it needs to be. That's how I feel. And I think that's just from my short story side of me, where, some short stories are 1,500 words and other short stories are 8,000 words. It's as long as it needs to be. So I feel like each chapter, I'm not trying to get like 2,000 words in each chapter. Instead, it's just the chapter is as long as it needs to be. If everything is in that chapter that needs to happen, then that's how long it should be. So while it's great that I'm aiming for 60K, I'm not obsessing over it. And I'm obsessing more with making sure that each chapter has each paragraph in each chapter has a purpose, and each paragraph pushes the story along, and each chapter pushes us toward this ending of the novel. So I'm calling it a novel, even though technically right now it's a novella, but I don't care. I don't care. It is a novel, and wish me luck. I hope everybody is doing well halfway through Novel November. I don't know what people are calling it now. Writing November, NaNoWriMo 2.0. But I hope everything's going well with your writing projects. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing. And I will see you all on the next video. Bye.